My name is Barbara Lášticová. I am from the Institute for Research in Social Communication of the Slovak Academy of Sciences in Bratislava, Slovakia. And I will be talking today about legitimizing anti-Gypsyism in political discourse. And I will present a comparative analysis from 5 EU countries. This research was carried out in collaboration with colleagues from Université Paris-Nanterre, ELTE Budapest, University of Yash, and University of Limerick, and was part of a European DG Justice funded project, PolRom. And this presentation is part of an invited symposium from the European Association of Social Psychology that is called Interplay Between Minority Exclusion and Inclusion, and is chaired by Tabia Hessler. The objective of the PolRom project was to examine the relationship between political discourse, anti-Gypsyism, and collective action, both pro and anti-Roma. And the political discourse analysis itself aimed at revealing the normative context with regard to Roma people reflected by the political discourses in 5 countries of the project: Hungary, Slovakia, Romania, France, and Ireland in 2018, which was the year preceding the project beginning. We assumed that political discourse creates a socio-normative climate that then allows to mobilize thoughts, such as stereotypes, affect, such as prejudices, and behaviors, such as discrimination, to legitimize collective action towards Roma people. And the literature we draw on points out that there is a double discourse regarding the Roma, that on the one hand promotes integration, rights, and equal opportunities for the Roma people, but on the other hand denies them recognition of structural violence, which is key element of anti-Gypsyism, institutional structural violence. And also there is an ambivalence towards the Roma, and there are subtle forms of racism present even in documents on Roma inclusion, and even despite official alignment with EU strategic goals, such as Popovici and Tilaga show in their analysis in Romania. We performed an extensive keyword search in online newspapers and news portals for 2018 in all the project countries. We combined the term Roma and Gypsy with different terms referring to relevant public authorities, such as Prime Minister, Minister, etc. And while at the very beginning, we made an overview of all the mentions of the Roma in the media in 2018, then we focused on so-called peak moments when the mentions of the Roma in newspapers peaked, and there were 3 or 4 of them in each country. And these peak moments created so-called discursive events in each country. And the final corpus was comprised of more than 700 articles in all the 5 countries. And we mainly focused on how the categories of us and them were constructed by the politicians in political discourse. And we used a combination of thematic analysis and critical discourse analysis to focus on these issues. What our results show is that we were able to identify 3 types of political discourse in these 5 countries in this particular year. The first one is openly hostile discourse that legitimizes a rhetoric of control, discipline, and intervention by the state authorities and institutions. The second one, benevolent anti-Gypsyism, is more about modern racism and is a paternalistic discourse, which in the best case communicates a positive and helpful attitude, but at the same time reinforces the subordinate position of Roma people in society. The third type of discourse is ambivalent, and it is a discourse that contrasts the situation of the Roma with the situation of immigrants, working strategically with out-group and in-group categories. And now I will try to show you some examples from each country. This is the most sharp and harsh example of openly hostile discourse that denies the Roma, in this case, the Irish travelers in Ireland, the right for recognition. And it is a quote by presidential candidate Peter Casey, who faced calls to pull out of the race after claiming travelers should not be recognized as an ethnic minority. So he went as far as publicly and openly stating this and denying them the right for recognition, because they are basically people coming in someone else's land who have no rights to have anything. In France, this example of openly hostile discourse constructs the Roma as a threat, which is absolutely common. But in this case, it is done to legitimize individual violence used by a mayor of a small French town of Vissou against a group of itinerant Roma who were camping in the neighborhood of his village, and whom he attacked with a katana because he felt they presented threat against him. And interestingly, this attracted a lot of attention in French media because there was a process with this mayor, but he defended himself by saying that it was purely self-defense, and he did it because otherwise they would take his life, and he downplayed using the violence by constructing it as self-defense, even though this violence was perpetrated by a public authority such as the mayor. Another example of openly hostile discourse is from Slovakia. Roma again are constructed as a threat, but this time to legitimize institutional violence used by the Slovak police during a police raid that happened in a small town in eastern Slovakia in 2013, where police entered the settlement where there were allegedly some criminals, and used completely inappropriate means to bring them to the police station. And during these raids, several people were hurt, and those men were later charged with attacking the police, and in a classic move where the victims are constructed as perpetrators by public authorities. And the case ended in Strasbourg, and the court in Strasbourg liberated those men, but the whole process lasted different court instances for almost 8 years. And the then Prime Minister Robert Fico justified this institutional violence that if a policeman uses legal means, it cannot be in violation of human rights, because then the cops are useless. And some statements, often irresponsible, made against the police encourage various criminal elements in society and unadaptable persons to continue behaving criminally. And even though he doesn't use the word Roma in this extract, it is implicit that by elements in society and unadaptable persons, he means the Roma, because this term of unadaptable persons was used also during socialism, where there was a very assimilationist policy in Slovakia to denote the Roma. The second discourse, benevolent anti-Gypsyism, is about legitimizing surveillance and discrimination, even though it is called benevolent, but it is done in a very subtle way by being paternalistic, by constructing these discriminating actions as helping the Roma. And this example is from a public discussion about a draft bill proposed by the Slovak Minister of Interior, who is on that picture on the right, in a small town of Krompachy in Slovakia, who proposed this bill on suppressing the criminality of Roma settlements. So this is not criminality of the individual Roma, but whole settlements are portrayed as a threat, and a threat to national security. And he says that we want to suppress the criminality of Roma settlement, and if we do not solve this, we will not create a better relationship between the majority and the minority, and we do it specifically for the Roma. I do not see anything discriminatory in this. So he constructs this as something that should help the Roma community, that should help to intergroup harmony, while it is pure racial profiling of crime. Another example of benevolent anti-Gypsyism is from Romanian press, but interestingly, it doesn't depict an event happening in Romania, but happening elsewhere, because there are very, very few mentions of the Roma in this year in Romanian newspapers. And it concerns the evacuation of a Roma camp in Rome, out of which a significant percentage were Romanian citizens. And the quote is by Matteo Salvini, who was the then Minister of Interior. And he said, "Some speak of shock. Why? I only think of these poor Roma children who are taught to steal and live illegally." So he uses again the argument of poor Roma children that are illiterate and that are taught to be criminals since the very beginning, to legitimize the eviction of those people from this camp where they were living peacefully. So it is again paternalistic, but again, it is a very strong argument to legitimize the actions of the government against the Roma. And finally, the ambivalent discourse is about how the Roma are portrayed strategically, either as an in-group, at us, or as an out-group, as them, according to what are the particular politicians' strategic goals. And this example is from the Hungarian Prime Minister's office official who compares migrants to the Roma and says that we have been living together with Gypsies for 600 years, and to this day we couldn't integrate them, just to speak clearly. So how could we integrate people who come from another world, another culture, with another identity? So here the Roma, suddenly they are us, but not completely us. But if we want them to become us, we cannot integrate people who are even more different. So again, the Roma are constructed as somewhere in between and are put in a very ambivalent position. To conclude, political and institutional discourses in Hungary, Slovakia, France, Romania, and Ireland were mostly characterized by open hostility, benevolent anti-Gypsyism, and ambivalent talk about the Roma. But even if there were positive discourses, that doesn't necessarily mean that they promote inclusion, because they often do not translate into policy making or legislation. What was common across all 5 countries was a dehumanization and objectification of the Roma, who were often referred to as camps, settlements, villages, etc., were essentialized and were portrayed as a collective character with no voice or agency, and not as individual people. Of course, the events were strategically presented as local if the politician wanted to downplay their importance, or as national, such as the case of draft bill on criminality of the Roma settlements, if the politician wanted to make a stronger argument and present them as a bigger threat for the in-group, for the national in-group, for the nation. And in all the countries, current events were completely disconnected from the historical discrimination and persecution of the Roma or in minorities in Europe in general. The only exception were the mentions of the Roma Holocaust Day, where several public figures pointed out that we really need to fight rising extremism if we don't want to witness again the events that Europe witnessed during the World War II in regards to Jews, the persecution, and Roma persecution. And finally, the structural causes of the situation of the Roma are rarely addressed, even if those present the core of anti-Gypsyism, which is defined as an institutional form of racism that is perpetrated in institutional discourse and that is structurally caused. If you want to find out more about our project and about the discourse analysis, you can visit the website of the project Forum. And in the meantime, I thank you for your attention.